Way back in the 17th century, a writer named Isaac Ambrose was studying the life of Jesus, and he zeroed in on one specific year, a year he saw as the crucial turning point, the moment everything changed. So today, let's dive into his fascinating analysis and see what he uncovered. You see, for the first couple of years of his public ministry, things were, well, they were pretty calm. Jesus was able to preach and teach with very little real opposition. It was this period of relative quiet where his message was just spreading, without a ton of conflict. But that all came to a screeching halt at the start of the third year. Isaac Ambrose puts it so simply, but you can feel the tension in it. Hitherto, all was quiet, till the beginning of this year. That one line just signals this dramatic shift, a moment when the entire nature of the ministry was about to transform. So what exactly happened? Well, Ambrose argues that this year wasn't just about conflicts suddenly popping up. No, it was a year where the core pillars of the entire mission were deliberately and strategically established. Let's explore his breakdown of these three huge foundational moves. All right, the very first pillar Ambrose points to is all about building for the future. It's about creating structure, a legacy, and it all kicks off with the formal selection of the apostles, the core team. Up until this moment, Jesus had pretty much been a solo act, but Ambrose saw a really strategic shift here. I mean, if you're going to build a ministry that will last long after you're gone, you need to empower others to carry the message forward. It was time to build a team. And what's so cool is how Ambrose breaks down the sheer intentionality of this moment. He sees 6 key details. First up, the person. These guys were chosen by Christ. They didn't just volunteer. Second, the place. It all happened on a mountain, which he saw as a symbol for a ministry that would be very public, but also really challenging. Third, the time. This decision was made after a full night of prayer. I mean, that just shows you the immense care that went into it. Fourth, the company. They were picked from his existing disciples, people who were already committed. Fifth, the number, 12. That's no accident. It's a clear echo of the 12 tribes of Israel. And finally, number 6, the end goal. They weren't just students anymore. They were apostles, being sent out into the world. So once the team was in place, what was their core message going to be? Well, this brings us to the second pillar Ambrose identifies, defining the mission itself as an unconditional welcome to absolutely anyone in need. Ambrose really highlights this as the central doctrine, a simple, direct invitation. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Just notice what's not there. There are no preconditions, no purity tests. As Ambrose puts it, this message shuts none out of heaven, but those that by unbelief lock the door against their own souls. But Ambrose is really quick to point out that this wasn't just some nice-sounding idea, a catchy slogan. He argues that this promise of welcome was demonstrated again and again in Jesus' actions, both in his stories and in his real-life encounters. The first example he turns to is one of the most famous stories of all, the parable of the lost son who finally comes home. For Ambrose, this story is just the perfect illustration of God's eagerness to welcome sinners back into the fold.
And Ambrose really analyzes the father's actions here, step by step. First, the father sees him while he's still a great way off. Next, he feels compassion, not anger. Then, and this is huge, he doesn't just wait on the porch, he runs to meet him. And finally, he embraces him, smelly, dirty, broken and all. The critical point Ambrose makes is that mercy doesn't just meet us halfway, it runs full speed towards us, totally outpacing our own slow journey back.
Okay, so that's the story, the parable. But to ground this idea in reality, Ambrose pivots to a powerful, real-world story that happened right in the same period. He describes a woman, someone with a pretty bad reputation, who walks right into the house of a Pharisee where Jesus is eating dinner. And in this incredible act of humility, she stands behind him just weeping, so much that she literally washes his feet with her tears, dries them with her own hair, kisses them, and anoints them with oil. It's this unbelievably vulnerable and public display of repentance. So while the Pharisee who's hosting the dinner is busy judging both the woman and Jesus, Jesus responds with the exact opposite of judgment. He responds with acceptance. He speaks to the host first and then directly to her, offering forgiveness and peace. So for Ambrose, this is the proof. That open invitation wasn't just a doctrine, it was a lived, breathing reality. All right, so we've got the team and we've got the message of welcome, but what does it actually feel like to follow this path?
This brings us to the third and final pillar Ambrose identifies, defining the Christian life itself as a path of peace.
Ambrose tackles that famous phrase, "My yoke is easy," and he interprets the yoke not as some heavy burden, but simply as Jesus' commandments and his way of life. The key here isn't that they're weightless, but that they are perfectly designed for us, kind of like a tool that fits your hand perfectly, not something awkward or heavy. And to make his case, Ambrose paints this really stark contrast between two inner worlds. On one hand, he describes the inner life of someone without this path as being like a troubled sea, just full of chaos and conflicting passions. But on the other hand, he says those who follow this way find this incredible inner tranquility, a peace which passeth all understanding. And this peace isn't just internal. Ambrose argues it's actually a threefold peace. It starts within you, calming all that inner turmoil. From there, it extends to our homes, creating loving and forgiving relationships. And finally, it radiates outward into the world, fostering charity and gentleness, which he believed could literally eliminate war itself. So let's pull all this together. What does Ambrose's portrait of this critical third year really show us? Well, it reveals a mission being methodically built on three core pillars. First, a hand-picked team to carry the message forward. Second, an unconditional welcome mat for anyone and everyone who's struggling. And third, a way of life that isn't defined by burdensome rules, but by a deep and all-encompassing peace. And that really just leaves us with this final question. We've just explored a nearly 400-year-old interpretation of leadership, of welcome, and of peace. So the question for us, right here and now, is what does this call for community, for unconditional inclusion, and for profound inner peace actually look like in our own lives and in our own world today?